Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we'll be looking at how faith-based diplomacy can make a big difference in building bridges between Israel and the nations. Warm welcome to the programme. My guest today is all the way from Israel. His name is Josh Reinstein. He is the president and director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. That's one to remember. So Josh, welcome to the Middle East Report.
Thanks for having me on the show, Simon.
Pleasure. And can you share something about your Jewish background and living in North America and how you ended up establishing the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus?
It's a pretty long journey. I was born in Toronto, Canada. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Like most Jewish kids growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, you had one of two heroes, either Sandy Koufax, the baseball player who wouldn't pitch on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, in the World Series, or Ariel Sharon, what Menachem Begin called the greatest general since Alexander. I was an Ariel Sharon guy and always loved Israel. My grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust, so I knew the importance of a state of Israel. And so my whole life growing up, I always wanted to move to Israel. And in '99, I got my chance, and I became a tank gunner shortly after when I volunteered to join the military in Israel. And after my army service, I thought, how can I best serve Israel? And I got into marketing and public relations, but also in politics. I became the spokesperson of a party called the Israel Beiteinu Party, and for the city of Jerusalem. And through that work, I realized that Christians were standing with Israel like no one else before, and that it was really Christians, not countries, that were standing with Israel. And so in 2004, we established the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, and then 3 years later, we established the Israel Allies Foundation, which I'm the president of, which we use to coordinate our sister caucuses in parliaments around the world.
So can you show us how it actually works? So essentially you work with Christian members of parliament, say the European Parliament, the British Parliament here, parliaments across the world, and connect them with Knesset members in Israel, is that correct?
Yes, we're calling it faith-based diplomacy, and what we do is we work with Christian members of parliament who take their biblical support for Israel and turn it into real political action. We established our first sister caucus in 2006 in the Congress in Washington, D.C., called the Congressional Israel Allies Caucus, and that started a domino effect of caucuses starting all over the world. We have caucuses in Europe, 16 altogether, in Africa, in Latin America, in Canada, in Australia, in Papua New Guinea, 3 in Asia, and we have altogether 40 Israel Allies Caucuses, which is a network of about 1,000 members of parliament who work together to strengthen their support for Israel through the network of the Israel Allies Foundation.
So can you share with us maybe a personal story or a story of reflection of how you've been able to help, say, a British member of parliament stand with Israel a lot more and also then connect with their counterparts in the Knesset?
Well, I can use the example of the event we had in the British Parliament in June. We have a sister caucus in the Parliament called the British Parliamentary Israel Allies Caucus. It's chaired by Mark Pritchard. And we hosted an event where we brought 2 members of Knesset over to the British Parliament to discuss the anti-Semitic nature of the BDS movement and also the anti-Semitic nature of the EU regulations on labeling goods from Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and the Golan. And we were able to gather 7 members of Parliament to work with our Knesset members to see how can we move forward on creating a legislative framework so that it would be more beneficial not just to Israel but to Britain in terms of international law.
So let's have a look now at the historic event that occurred last year. And this was 2 days after President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
On Monday, May 14th, 2018, the nation of Israel celebrated 2 momentous occasions. The 70th anniversary of the modern state of Israel and the move of the U.S. Embassy to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. Yesterday, Wednesday, the 16th of May, Guatemala also moved their embassy to Jerusalem, and to celebrate all of the long-awaited acknowledgement of their modern and ancient capital, Israeli ministers, together with Jewish and Christian leaders from around the world, met in the Jerusalem Knesset as the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. KCAC and the Israel Allies Foundation, pioneered by the late and beloved minister of the Knesset, Rabbi Benjamin Elon, works with congresses and parliaments around the world to mobilize political support for Israel based on Judeo-Christian values. Esther Levins and the Unity Coalition for Israel have also worked closely with elected officials to alert UCI members throughout the past 27 years to key issues touching Israel's indigenous rights, safety, and prosperity.
Hey Esther, this is Chris Mitchell. We're here at the Knesset. I'm with Beverly, and I just wanted to say what a blessing you have been to Israel, to the church, to the believers, the Christian believers for so many years, and you really are here, I'm sure, in spirit because of what you have done to really help make this day possible. You've been such a pioneer in many ways, standing up for Israel and uniting Christians and Jews on behalf of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. So just greetings here from the Knesset. This is an amazing meeting just 2 days after the United States Embassy has been officially opened. Just a few hours ago, actually about an hour and a half ago, the Guatemalan Embassy has been officially open. Here they're going to celebrate that at the Knesset as well. So it's an amazing day. The scripture that I keep hearing from many people, as if we were dreamers, like the Jewish people when they returned from Babylon. And here we are 70 years after the founding of the State of Israel, when the United States, Guatemala, and many other nations yet coming here to Jerusalem. It's an amazing day, and glad you're part of it, even if you're there in Kansas City. So God bless, Esther. We love you, and be in touch.
And we send all of our love to you today. I'm Christine Dorick. Shalom.
Done for the state of Israel and the blessing that you are. And we just want to say greetings. My name is Tommy Waller, and what a blessing, what a legacy you've left for us, and just the blessing that you are. Thank you for all you've done and all you're doing.
This is David Decker, and I'm here in Israel. Thank you, Esther, for all that you're doing. We love you. We're standing on your shoulders. You're a giant. You're one of our Zionist heroes. Thank you for all that you did, even back in the 90s, to get this thing started where the embassy was moved. And we celebrate with you today what God is doing in Israel. It's wonderful, wonderful times. This is the best time ever for Zionism and for Christian Zionism. Thank you, Esther. Don't give up. Keep strong. Stay strong in the Lord and the power of His might. We love you and pray for you, Esther.
And last year, that was such an incredible historic occasion. One of the issues that you've really been working on, Josh, is to actually get parliaments and political representatives across the world, particularly those who support Israel, to put pressure on their governments to recognise Israeli sovereignty over Jerusalem and to move their embassies from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, following the lead of President Trump. Can you share with us the work that you've done in Congress in preparing that ground to put pressure on congressmen and senators, which would then resulted in President Trump moving the embassy last year?
Well, there wasn't a big move of pressure. The Congress in 1995 passed the Congressional Act on the Embassy of Jerusalem, which basically made it law that they need to, by American law, move their embassy to Jerusalem. And what happened is that every president afterwards got a waiver every 6 months that he had to sign, every 6 months saying, we're going to postpone it another 6 months. So the big question is, how do we get the president not to sign the waiver? And really, it became a faith-based issue. Christians gathered all over America and decided that Jerusalem is an important issue to them, that as Christians and people believe in the Bible, the reestablishment of the city of Jerusalem is part of their prophetic views. They understand that God needs to do this before the coming of the Messiah, And because of that, they've turned it into a real political movement. And so I would say that the moving of the embassy, the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, was probably the biggest success in faith-based diplomacy's history, because this is the first time that Christians gathered on this specific issue and were able to turn it into a big success. We're taking that model and we're using that in countries all over the world. The next country that moved their embassy was Guatemala. It's no coincidence that the majority of Guatemalans are Bible-believing Christians who believe in God's prophecies when it comes to Jerusalem as well. So the fact that Christians are gathering and they're taking that support and they're putting pressure on their Christian leadership to put pressure on the political leadership to stand with Israel is really the secret sauce in faith-based diplomacy, and it's why we're seeing successes with the moving of embassies to Jerusalem today.
And what does it mean for the Israeli government? What does it mean for the Israeli people, knowing that, you know, the world's leading superpower, the world's only superpower, the United States, recognises Israeli sovereignty over the eternal city?
It's an amazing feeling to see the U.S. flag fly over Jerusalem in its embassy. You have to understand that for the Jewish people, Jerusalem's always been our capital since the time of King David. You know, we recognized Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. It doesn't change things on the ground so much because our Knesset, our parliament, is in Jerusalem. Our Supreme Court's in Jerusalem. It's always been our capital. It was very insulting that countries wouldn't let us pick our capital. Every other country gets to, so other countries say, well, we're going to pick your capital for you, and we want to put our embassies in Tel Aviv. But on the wider view, it's incredibly significant because in life, people follow symbols, and the falling of communism was that symbol of the Berlin Wall coming down. The symbol of Saddam Hussein's statue toppling was the end of the Iraqi regime. And the symbol of America moving its embassy to Jerusalem, I believe, will take Jerusalem as an issue off the table. We're never going to divide Jerusalem, and I think now people are starting to understand that now that America's moved their embassy there.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this wonderful video called Shalom, Yerushalayim.
הכרזת העצמאות שנתפרסמה היום.
10:20, 7 ביוני, אנו עוברים את שער היום.
This is our challenge. We really believe that Jerusalem, it's not just a political issue. This is the heart of every Jew, of every believer, Christians, everyone that has it in his own heart. And those verses are not just on a book, on a shelf of books. They are inside ourselves. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper, that love be.
I wanted to just say a word of heartfelt congratulations for launching your new headquarters in Shalom, Yerushalayim building in Jerusalem. I'm encouraged to hear the important work being accomplished by the foundation, not only in Israel, but all over the world.
We stand for United Jerusalem as the capital of the land of Israel.
I'm very excited and appreciate this initiative, launch Shalom Jerusalem Center here in Israel and Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is undivided capital of Israel.
We believe that a united Jerusalem with all people praying together and with people coming from everywhere in the world to be together in the same place.
Jerusalem is the undivided city of the state of Israel.
Pempelani mtendele wa Jerusalem.
Sean prosperados los que te aman.
Capital city of Israel and the Jewish people.
And we want to stand with Israel and also with a united Jerusalem as a capital state.
Demandez la paix de Jérusalem, que ceux qui t'aiment jouissent du repos.
Sichere Ruhe in deinen Palästen.
I support the initiative of the Shalom Yerushalayim House in order that the friendly cooperation between Israel and Hungary may result in strengthened relations so we could build a happier and more livable world at a specific location through a specific institution, and may all this be realized in the heart of a united Jerusalem.
Az egységes Jeruzsálem szívében valósulhasson meg.
Mangatafia dana na wan Jerusalema, hambin na nizetianau.
Esenlik dileyin Yeruşalim'e. Esenlik bulsun seni sevenler.
Pregate per la pace in Gerusalemme. Prosperino coloro che ti amano, o Gerusalemme.
As we all know, Israel today lives under an ominous shadow, a threatening neighbor whose leader has actually expressed a desire to wipe Israel off the map. America stands with Israel. Congratulations on your new headquarters. I wish you every success on behalf of our nation and our most cherished ally.
June 7th, 1967. After nearly 2,000 years, Jerusalem is in Jewish hands again.
השעה 10:20, 7 ביוני, ברגע זה אנו עוברים את שער האריות. אני נמצא עכשיו בצל של השער, ושוב אנו יוצאים לתוך השמש לרחוב. שער האריות, אנחנו בתוך העיר העתיקה. אנחנו בתוך העיר העתיקה. החיילים צמודים לקירות. אנו צועדים עכשיו בוויה דולורוזה. אנו צועדים בוויה דולורוזה. אתם מבינים מה זה? העיר העתיקה. אנו נמצאים בתוך העיר העתיקה שוב פעם. מסגד אל-אקצא. כאן לא יכולנו להיכנס גם בזמן המנדט. רגע! יש דקות! יש דקות! שיקשה להביע במילים את ההרגשה שלנו.
Avirarim chalul kaya
שבויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה
And fantastic to be able the opportunity then to work with so many congressmen and senators on behalf of Israel. Now, clearly, one thing that members of Knesset, the members of Israel's parliament, kind of really need is allies and political allies around the world. As we know that it really depends on which administration is in power. And if we take the previous US President Obama, that Israel found herself very, very isolated. So how important is it for members of Knesset to have very, very good relationships with various representatives in different parliaments around the world and to build those bridges?
I think it's incredibly significant. First of all, the fact that we have groups within parliaments that work to support Israel is a huge advantage when working with individual countries around the world. And the opposite of that is true in international organizations like the UN or the IMF or the International Court, where you have representatives from many, many countries, some of them that are very big enemies towards the state of Israel, does not like Israel. So in international forums, we're always at a disadvantage. We had 1 vote in the UN compared to 22 Arab votes, many more Muslim votes. But within parliaments, we have a great advantage because there aren't, Muslim allies caucuses or Palestinian allies caucuses, there are Israel allies caucuses. And these caucuses work to develop real lines of communication and cooperation with Knesset members in the parliament to work towards mobilizing support for Israel and bringing both nations closer together.
I recently had the absolute pleasure of conducting a number of different interviews and programs inside the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, which I've got to say is the hardest thing I've ever done in broadcasting, as the Israelis love to change the rules. But did get the opportunity to interview Michael Oren, MK, who was also working as a minister on foreign affairs in the Prime Minister's office. And he told a very, very compelling story that when he was Israel's ambassador to the United States, he would go and visit senators, and they would open the Bible and say, and particularly where it says that I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. And he said that one senator opened that and said, how much do you need for your Arrow missile defense program? We'll get it for you. So when it comes to Bible-believing Christians, particularly in the States, in the Senate, how important is, for example, the Bible to them and their support for Israel seem to go hand in hand?
Absolutely. Faith-based diplomacy, which is based on the idea that people are taking their biblical support and turning it into real political action, is based exactly on that concept that if you believe in the Bible, you're going to stand with Israel. Now look at it a different way. If you have an economic agenda, you're not necessarily going to stand with Israel. We don't have the oil wealth that our neighboring countries have. And if you have a political agenda, I just mentioned, something like the UN, we're outnumbered 1 to 22 at least in the best case scenario. It's only people who put values and beliefs ahead of economic and political concerns that stand with Israel. And those turn out to be our tried true friends, both Jews and Christians who believe in the Bible. And if you believe in the Bible, you have a moral imperative to stand with the state of Israel and the fulfillment of God's covenant with Abraham. And so because of that, we're seeing incredible support all over the world, not just in the Congress and the Senate, in the Parliament in Australia, in the Parliament in Malawi, in the Parliament in Romania. People are standing with Israel because they realize that, first of all, it's the right thing to do. We're the only free democracy in the Middle East. But secondly, that they have a biblical mandate to do this.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at the success of the Christian Caucuses, sorry, let me repeat that. The Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, that's it, got it right that time, conference in Washington, D.C. back in 2013.
Welcome all of you. Today we're gathering here because we got to witness, after long years of the concept that we call faith-based diplomacy, that when people of faith take their biblical support and turn it into political action, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And today we got to, 2 days ago we got to see the embassy move to Jerusalem, and today we got to see the Guatemalan embassy move to Jerusalem, and we know that many more are following because of the hard work. We are here at an event in the Knesset from the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus to celebrate the biggest success in faith-based diplomacy the world has ever seen. We always knew that if we could take people who have biblical support for Israel and turn into real political action, we can do things that are unheard of. And today we saw it with the embassy move to Jerusalem from the United States Embassy, but also today the Guatemalan Embassy to Jerusalem. And we have with us our members of our sister caucus, the Congressional Israel Allies Caucus in Guatemala, here to celebrate this together with Christian leaders from around the world, because this is really their victory, and we're all excited to be here.
Trying to find the word, overwhelming, exciting, glorious, all of these words are much smaller than what I can to express what I am feeling this week when Israel is celebrating its 70th anniversary, and we're seeing the world beginning to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the people of Israel, the capital of the state of Israel, but mostly the biblical capital of God. We see all of these events have a real deep, faithful meaning and sentiment, and therefore we do hope that we're actually beginning the next step in the process of redemption, and Jerusalem and Temple Mount will become a world center of calling in the name of the one and only God, and peace upon the world. God bless, God willing.
And just can you share with us some of the other issues that you're working on in terms of working with different parliamentarians across the world? I suppose one of the major issues of our day really is sadly the rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing across the nations, particularly in the Western world. How are you working with political representatives, say, in the British Parliament and the European Parliament, tackling this major problem?
Yes, the BDS movement, which is the modern form of anti-Semitism, it's the same classical as anti-Semitism that we saw in the 30s. They just replaced the word Jew with Israel, is really one of the main focuses of the Israel Allies Foundation. We work very hard in the United States for promoting anti-BDS legislation, and today we're working very closely with parliaments in Europe to try to defeat some of the BDS moves here. And in addition, the regulations that you have in the EU on labeling goods from Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and the Golan, which are very anti-Semitic in their nature. Every region has different problems with the rise of anti-Semitism today. Anti-Semitism is growing in leaps and bounds in the 21st century. But I believe that probably the most egregious example of anti-Semitism is in the EU's regulation on labeling goods from Judea and Samaria, Golan, and Jerusalem. Because first of all, it's something that is seen as acceptable, when really what it is it's the same idea of the Nuremberg laws, where they're going to boycott goods and products that are produced by Jews. And just to give you an example, there are 200 territorial fights around the world. The EU has only picked one of them to label. And not only have they done that, and that already is against the World Trade Organization, where you have to have fair balance between all different conflicts, they've only taken one side of the conflict, which is the Israeli side of the conflict, not the Palestinian side. But even more egregiously, and I think this is where you get into the heart of how anti-Semitic it really is, they've only picked one religion in that side. So if you're an Israeli Arab, they won't label your goods coming into Europe. It's only if you're a Jewish Israeli that your goods are labeled. And I think that is very scary that something like that is acceptable in this day and age.
Particularly when it's coming from the EU itself. So would you say it's a complete incorporation of the entire BDS movement, known as the boycott, divestments and sanctions movement, as a matter of European policy towards Israel?
I think that the bureaucrats within the EU have very much been influenced by the BDS movement. We're seeing a lot of moves against the state of Israel. Even though trade goes up every year with independent countries, our economy is booming. We're not seeing the effects there, but it is affecting Palestinian workers who work in these companies, and it's just sad that there's not a policy of coexistence and peace coming out of EU, but one of hatred and labeling of Jewish goods.
So let's see how the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus is actually working to campaign against the BDS.
The Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, BDS, is the formal name that's been given to the economic and political components of this campaign. More specifically, BDS refers to the tactics that are being employed to discriminate against Israelis and Jews and their trade partners and their supporters all around the world, in many countries and even in states here in the USA. BDS constitutes commercial discrimination against Israel on the basis of national origin. The BDS movement was given its formal name in the early 2000s by non-governmental organizations affiliated with the Palestinian Authority and helping to continue decades-old Arab League boycotts against Israel. At the same time, this movement employs classic anti-Semitic themes, blood libels, gross distortions of Zionism, distortions of Israel's Jewish national character, its history, and its government policies. This strategy has helped to facilitate the development of anti-Israel and anti-Jewish perspectives among unsuspecting audiences who otherwise know very little about Israel and the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that's a real danger. In May of 2015, South Carolina became the first state in America to adopt modernized legislation regulating against the problem of commercial discrimination and boycotts of Israel. And I know this church is a good friend of Representative Alan Clemens from South Carolina, who's been here. You know, just as an aside, I want to let you guys know that Representative Clemens today went ahead and filed the next step in making sure that these problems are properly pursued in the state of South Carolina by filing a bill that's going to be the first to create a statutory definition of anti-Semitism. And, you know, I'm going to be with him tomorrow. I'm going to be with him tomorrow seeing a couple of senators, congressional senators from South Carolina. But he did call me right as I walked through the door and as I was shaking hands with Pastor, and he told me to make sure I sent his regards and to let you guys know he was looking forward to being back here among friends. So he was our champion, and he got the job done in 2015. And that bill, of course, passed unanimously. And it was the result of about 2 years' worth of policy development and legal research and educational resourcing for our part at the Israel Allies Foundation. This was a big effort for us guys. And now, as you also heard, 16 additional states have followed suit. The most recent one was Michigan. And we've got lots more coming down the pike, guys. This is a serious effort here. So, yeah. I make that point because you guys need to know that these other states are watching right now the lead that Texas is taking. You guys are the showcase. You're the starting point for confidence that these other states need to go ahead and perhaps face more opposition than you guys will face here, but we got to get it done here so that other states understand, you know, this is the way it's meant to be done.
And as all of you know, the best way to counter the BDS movement is to buy Israeli goods and to visit Israel. I suppose one of the big shocking BDS developments is what's happening in the Republic of Ireland. The fact that they are trying to introduce legislation where anyone who buys Israeli goods from Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and we know the Golan produces very good wine, and Jerusalem has so many tourists that an Irish tourist could face a heavy fine if they buy souvenirs from Jerusalem, or even a 5-year prison sentence. Can you share with us how shocking it is that the Irish Parliament has decided to push through such hurtful damaging and hate-filled legislation.
Yes, again, it's a complete double standard. It's a great example of how anti-Semitism has become completely acceptable. They have targeted the one free Jewish state in the world, the one place that not is just a Jewish state, but all its citizens have rights. I mean, we have 18% Muslim, 2% Christian in our country, and they've targeted this free democracy, and they're making it so that if a Christian tourist goes into the old city of Jerusalem and buys a souvenir that says Jerusalem, they go to jail for 5 years. And that's how ridiculous this has become. Now, let me be clear. I don't think that these attempts are going to hurt our economy. Our economy is booming. We're one of the fastest growing Western economies in the world. But I think the Irish economy is going to be destroyed if they pass this. I think anyone who has a company in Ireland will pull out because we have anti-BDS legislation in 27 states in the US. This is directly why those legislations were enacted. Big companies will not be able to do business with Ireland, not with Israel. But just think about how self-destructive this policy is. There's so much hatred towards the Jewish state and the Jewish people that they're willing to damage their own economy just to stick a finger in Israel's eye. And it just shows how far this has become a reality. And people said, you know, after the Holocaust, this is never going to happen again. Well, it's happening.
But isn't there great danger, for example, that obviously if we look at the Irish model, it is the most extreme in the Western world. But the danger is that, you know, for example, because of the political chaos that we have in Britain because of Brexit and the political uncertainty, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, and I personally hope this will never happen, but we could see that Jeremy Corbyn becomes our next Prime Minister. Now, he was the president of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. He has said in Parliament that Hamas and Hezbollah are his friends. He even describes Black September as his cousins and has a very much identifies with the Palestinian cause. Now, he can't even mention the word Israel. So isn't there a danger that someone like him, having the keys to 10 Downing Street, would actually look at the Irish model and say this is something that we could adopt and try and push it through the British Parliament?
Absolutely. I think that no one would debate that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite. People in his own party have resigned because of his anti-Semitism. And I believe that we're going to see this model more and more in Western Europe, not less and less. There's a big problem with the rise of radical Islam here in Western Europe that has joined forces with a radical atheist element within the parliament, people who are very anti-religion, very anti-God, and people who are anti-God and religion will always be against Israel, but also against the Christian community. And I think that Christians in England and Britain in general need to wake up. We're always the tip of the sword, but it starts with the Saturday people and it ends with the Sunday people. And I think that as these things progress, this is going to be even more of a threat for people who want to be Christian here in Britain as well. But again, these steps will not destroy Israel. These steps will destroy Britain. If Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, I think there will be mass exodus of the Jewish community from Britain to Israel or to the United States, and that will just cripple your economy. I think overnight you will find incredible economic effects in the fact that you have just elected a blatant anti-Semite as your Prime Minister. But it's also scary to see that 50% of the population is supporting him. And even though he is anti-Semitic, and that is a big wake-up call for people who say, hey, you know, anti-Semitism is a thing of the past. It's not. It's here, it's present, and it's growing.
What are the potential dangers, would you say, in terms of engaging with members of Knesset to have an influence on their counterparts in the British Parliament or in the European Parliament to really take these issues very, very seriously? Because what starts with the Jewish people never finishes with the Jewish people, does it?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a lot of attempts to try to influence Europe on these issues. I know that we're working very hard to try to fight BDS in Europe and in the anti-labeling campaign, but Europe is well behind the United States on these issues, and I think people in free democratic economies need to wake up and see that it's an advantage to work with Israel. You know, we've created probably the majority of the important high-tech devices and technologies in the 21st century, from the CAT scan to the laptop to the cell phone to the text messaging. These are all things that come out of Israel. And we have to understand that by boycotting Israel, you are hurting your own economic advantage as well. But I have to say that we're seeing a lot of positive signs, mostly from Eastern Europe right now, in them understanding that, first of all, a boycott of Israel is illegal under international law and according to the World Trade Organization, and also will damage their own economies, and they're saying we just don't want to do it anymore.
So let's have a look now, this fantastic video that says why you can't boycott Israel.
Some say the world should boycott Israel. If you're one of them, you should know this would be a mission impossible in the West. That's because Israeli technology is everywhere. When you get up in the morning, get into your car and drive to work, you probably use Waze to avoid traffic. Waze was developed in Israel. If your eyes stray from the road for a moment, you will promptly be warned by your mobile eye safety system, another Israeli development. Your workday is stressing you out. Your smartwatch will monitor your pulse and remind you to slow things down a little, thanks to an electro-optic sensor developed in Israel. Your laptop most probably runs on a processor developed in Intel, Israel. Do you use the internet? Next time you visit Facebook and Google or use Microsoft products, remember they all use network components developed by Mellanox. From Israel, do you transfer data on memory sticks? That technology was invented in Israel. Those family and friend photos you snap with your mobile camera, the camera was developed in Israel. Enjoy getting help from Google Complete? You guessed right, that too was developed in Israel. And last but not least, next year, Israel Aerospace Industries, from Israel, and Facebook will launch a satellite that will provide internet connection in remote areas where even water is not available.
And that is a must-see for all those Israel haters out there. And let's see how they go on with boycotting Israel and still continue their living in the 21st century. That's what's so remarkable about Israel, Josh, is that Israel is at the forefront of the info-technological innovation that's really taking our 21st century by storm. And what is it about Israeli innovation that's making the world a better place, and Israeli technology changing the world and the way we live?
Look, I think that it's the fulfillment of prophecy. We were supposed to be a light unto the nations, and we are a light unto the nations through our technology. Our technology is not just innovative and helpful, but it's changing the world. You know, everyone knew about the famine in northern Africa. There was always drought and famine and problem. Our drip irrigation system has changed that. We now grow fruits and vegetables in the sand. We have desalination plants. Over 50% of the Israeli drinking water is from the ocean. We separate the water from the salt, we sell the salt, and we drink the water. I mean, these technologies are really transforming everywhere. I just found out in Britain, 1 in every 6 medications was produced in Israel. I mean, can you imagine that, what your hospitals would be like without Israel? So there's a tremendous amount of support Israel's giving to the nations, not just in our technologies, but in intelligence, counterintelligence, in our economic abilities. But it's this feverish virus of anti-Semitism that is clouding people's judgment once again, and they're standing against the only Jewish state. You know, some people say, I'm just against Israel, not the Jewish community. Well, who do you think lives in Israel? Over half the Jewish population lives in Israel. So it's the one Jewish state, and we have the right to self-determination just like any other people. And you'll never hear Jeremy Corbyn say, I'm against any other race's quest for self-determination except for the Jewish people.
Which is a tragedy on his part, and obviously brings a curse upon himself and upon his party. I have to ask you, Josh, now when it comes down to security issues, I mean, Israel leads the world in counter-terrorism, and if it wasn't for Israeli intelligence, if it wasn't for Israeli security, the world would be a far dangerous place. What role does Israeli military know-how and intelligence play in really protecting Western nations and building bridges between Israel and the West?
Well, look, there's an incredible amount of cooperation between Interpol, between the CIA and the Mossad, and things that are public domain that people know about. But I think our biggest advantage is probably one of the saddest, is that we have been the victims of a terrorist campaign since the founding of the state in 1948. So we have the most experience. And because we have the most experience, we're able to analyze threats and find a solution to counter these threats faster than anyone else. And I think that's really the secret to our ability to share intelligence, to crack down on terrorist attacks around the world. A lot of people thought that when they were supporting, the PLO in Israel and there were terrorist attacks, that it was going to be contained to Israel. But we all knew that we were just, the first front. When suicide bombings were happening in Israel and everyone kind of turned a blind eye, we were the only ones who knew that suicide bombings are now going to happen other places around the world because they turned that blind eye. So I think people are starting to understand that there's a lot to gain from working with Israel in intelligence and military fields as well.
As the French have found that out to themselves, whereby previously under President Hollande had nothing to do with Israel during those awful couple of years where France was being hit by horrendous terrorist attacks by ISIS, and it was really Israeli know-how and security that has made a big difference in bolstering up French security, and then gone on to say that then the French government has invested more and is dealing now at a ministerial level with Israel as whereby they weren't before. So it just shows you, doesn't it, how much Israel has to offer the world, not only in terms of its innovation, but also in terms of its security and its ability to deal with terrorism.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that when we started the Israel Allies Foundation and the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus in 2004, I was coming to Europe, and I was really asking European countries to stand with Israel. We need your support. We have major security fears. We need your help today. Today, when I come, I'm more worried for the European countries than I am for the Israel as a country.
And one of the big issues that you're campaigning on, Josh, is the nuclear threat, the terrorism threat, and also the sheer military threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran to the nation of Israel, and the fact that here is one nation that is allowed to call for Israel's existence to be wiped out. How imperative is it that politicians across the Western world wake up to the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Look, I think the Islamic Republic of Iran is the greatest threat facing Israel today. It's the only existential threat. If they are allowed to get nuclear weapons, they'll use them. They have a foreign policy of wiping Israel off the map. But I think that Europe has been very naive in its negotiations with Iran. The Iranian Republic doesn't need the missiles they're developing to hit Israel. They can already. They're developing these missiles to hit Europe. And the Iranian Caliphate and what they're trying to do is a takeover of Europe, the United States, not just Israel. We're just the beginning. And Europe has basically turned a blind eye to that. They're still in the crazy deal with Iran that allows them, according to the deal, to get nuclear weapons after 10 years. We're 3 years into that deal. So does anyone want in 7 years that Iran has nuclear capabilities? The Saudis definitely don't. And this is really the shocker, that Israel and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan are aligned with America on this issue, whereas Europe, Western Europe, for the most part, is aligned with Iran. I mean, shouldn't that tell you that something here is going wrong? And it doesn't make sense because there are biting sanctions coming from America now. It doesn't make any sense for Europe to stand with Iran economically anymore. So where is it coming from? And that's the big question. We're seeing a shift in Western Europe where they're coming closer to Iran, whereas every other nation is getting farther away. And the Islamic Republic of Iran is today the greatest threat the world has. They're the #1 funder of terrorism, and they're developing nuclear weapons for a purpose. And people in Europe better figure out what that purpose is.
And Josh, finally coming down to the last couple of minutes of the program or so, what role can our Christian viewers who love Israel and love the Jewish people play in terms of having an influence on their political representatives and really turning that love for Israel into political action that blesses the nations?
Well, I think that politically, the best thing that your viewers can do is contact their representatives. You know, I think people don't understand that if 10 people contact their representatives on an issue, that's like the equivalent of 1 million people contacting their representatives, because no one ever contacts their representatives on any issue. So if 10 is doing that, you got to put out that fire. I think by getting in touch with your members of parliament and saying that Israel's a major issue is an important thing that they can do to support Israel. But also, I think that your viewers need to understand that we're not the ones that are only under attack. They are as well. And there's a major push, just like against Israel, because we're proof of God's existence, that the Bible is true, that the prophecies are real. There's a major push to wipe out people who believe in those prophecies and that Bible. And unfortunately, it's not the Jews that are being killed and murdered in the Middle East today. It's Christians. And the genocides that we're seeing today are against Christians, simply for being Christians in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia. And so people need to wake up and see that you can be silent right now, but in the end, it always comes here. And that's why it's important to get involved with the issue and make it an important issue in your life, and to teach your children about the issue, your friends, to discuss it. And I would also echo what you said before. Come to Israel. Come and see it for yourself. You know, they have these crazy lies about Israel, that we're a dangerous place, that we're an apartheid state. 1 hour in Jerusalem and you'll understand that all those things are false. We're the safest capital in the world, statistically. And also, you know, you can go into any supermarket and see Arabs and Jews shopping. You can see Arabs and Jews working there. There's no apartheid. There's free democracy for every citizen of Israel. I would just encourage you to come and see it for yourself.
Josh, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report. And I just want to thank you all for watching today's program. It's so important that all of us make a stand for Israel, and we make a stand amongst our political representatives in Parliament to let them know about the truth and the righteousness of Israel's cause, and how by standing with Israel blesses our nation and enriches our nation both spiritually, economically and politically. So we leave you with this beautiful song in tribute to the incredible nation that is the nation of Israel.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורנים נישא ברוח 40 עם כל פעמונים ופתרת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה חזרנו אל אורות המים לשוק ולכיכר שופר קורא בהר הבית בעיר העתיקה ובנערות אשר בסלע אלפי שמשות זוכרות נשוב נרד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור הלא לכל שירה קטונתי מצעיר בנייך או מאחרון המשוררים, כי שמך צורף את השפתיים כנשיקת שרף. אם אשכחך ירושלים